Okay, good afternoon. This is David Raymond, and welcome to this week's weekly workshop. This is going to be the last workshop we do for this semester, so we end. We're gonna wrap it up. I'm sure some high schools are still in session next week, but I know there's final exams going on and that kind of stuff. So we're gonna wrap up. We're gonna wrap up the workshops this week, and then we'll start them up. In January. I think we're starting up on the 15th of January with sort of take off where we left off here. So today we're going to talk about an intro to Linux, and this may seem like a little bit of a step back. We've done some hands-on already, but what I wanted to do today was I wanted to show off some hands-on exercises that I think would be very useful to teachers who have been teachers who are starting a new cybersecurity class during the spring semester. These are certainly lessons that you could roll out to your students if you're going to do a familiarization with Linux and the cyber range, for example. And even if you've had a course that has run through the first semester, if you haven't really gotten very deep into the cyber range, or if you've started doing some stuff and your students aren't feeling good about Linux familiarity, I think these are hands-on exercises that you can use either in the classroom or as homework. Assign them as optional for students who think they need some more help just getting basic familiarization with Linux, or walk through them in class with your students and have students work on them, and you can sort of explain what's going on as they work through it. So these are exercises only. There's no slides that go along with them. We may add some slides later on, but what we really wanted to do is get the hands-on exercises out on the street for use in class. Okay, so weekly workshops every week, Tuesday at 1 p.m. These are all recorded and shared on our website, virginiacyberrange.org. So if you go to the community tab and then look for weekly workshops, I think there's, 8 or 10 of these out there, maybe more, covering a variety of different topics, cryptography, and some, the early ones were sort of how to use the range and how to add students, how to create exercise environments, all that stuff. But we've hit various different topics since then, and we'll continue hitting various different topics after the Christmas break. And as always, if you have particular content that you want to see, then please, or something that we've already talked about that you want to revisit, please send me an email or send an email to contact@virginiacyberrange.org, and we will hit that content at some point. All right, I always start with technology news. This is what I do in the classroom as well as on these workshops. So these are a couple of, I thought, interesting news stories related to China. The first one, the Huawei CFO, Chief Financial Officer, was arrested in Canada last week, still under arrest in Canada. But arrested for extradition to the U.S. So this is Meng Wanzhou, who is she's the chief financial officer for Huawei. Huawei is a major telecom company in China. So they probably the primary telecom company. So they provide communication services. They're an ISP, but beyond that, they provide. They make devices, telephones, switches, all kinds of different electronic devices. If you sort of think like Cisco and Samsung and Palo Alto sort of all mixed together into one company, Huawei kind of does it all. So major company in China, certainly very closely tied to the Chinese government, and that is, in many ways, that's just the nature of business in China. It's a different form of government, a different different relationships between the government and industry, and major companies are all tied at some level to the Chinese government. And so this Meng Wanzhou, who was arrested, she's actually the daughter of the founder of Huawei, billionaire Ren Zhengfei, and she was arrested. It comes down to she was arrested on suspicion of violating sanctions on Iran, right? So there are UN sanctions against Iran, and countries are expected to abide by those sanctions, and some of those sanctions have to do with selling electronic equipment to Iran, and Huawei is suspected of violating those sanctions. And actually, this has been ongoing since early 2017, so this isn't a new charge against Huawei. And in fact, Meng Wanzhou, who has children going to school in the U.S., she's avoided travel to the U.S. for fear that she would be arrested in the U.S. And she had lived in the U.S., I believe. I know she had lived in Canada for many years, currently resides in China, but owns property in Canada. And it's not clear whether there was some sort of standing order that if she showed up in China, they should arrest her. It's interesting that this happened in the context of ongoing disputes between the U.S. and China on tariffs and trade negotiations. So there's some fairly big news last week about trade negotiations and potential tariffs between the U.S. and China, and there's this sort of 90-day reprieve that was supposedly agreed upon between the presidents of the U.S. and China. And now, while the tensions are sort of high in the trade arena, all of a sudden we have this arrest of this high-level person in China. And so the question is this some sort of a way to leverage, used as a tool, a leverage tool in those negotiations, or certainly it's not clear what's going on at those high levels, but pretty surprising, frankly, that this person was arrested. I mean, this kind of thing would normally be handled I would expect to be handled in a different way, and so I think it's big news in the U.S. Chinese trade negotiations. And then the second story is also related to China. U.S. preparing to charge Chinese hackers, and so if you've been in information security for any amount of time, you've heard terms like the advanced persistent threat. And APT is a term that was coined, I don't know, probably 8 or 10 years ago, and it was used to describe nation-state level actors who are doing offensive cybersecurity operations. And when you hear the term APT, it almost is always used to call out either China or Russia. And those are two countries that have long been suspected of conducting these offensive cybersecurity operations against the U.S. And the thing that's, I would say, a little bit different about China is that so countries do espionage operations against each other all the time, and it used to be spies who'd go to a country and do their try to record or try to recruit people who worked in the government to be informants, or different ways espionage was conducted over the years. And nowadays the old school Cold War era spying is out of favor, and now most of this espionage is conducted over computer networks, right? So we can get just as much information by hacking the Kremlin's computer systems as we can by trying to recruit people who work in the Kremlin to give us information about their ongoing operations. And it's much safer, right? Because we can do the hacking from on the other side of the ocean. And espionage is one thing, and believe it or not, it's sort of, it's not, espionage is not a violation of international law, and it's sort of understood that countries are going to do that to each other, and countries do that to the U.S., and I'm sure we do that to other countries, and so espionage is one thing. The activity of the Chinese is a little bit different in that they're less concerned about espionage-like activities. They're less concerned with trying to discover state secrets. They're more concerned with stealing intellectual property, and that's what the Chinese have done for years. And again, it gets to the Chinese government and industry are very closely intertwined, and so if a Chinese government organization can find plans for U.S. Aircraft, for example, they will readily share those plans with the Chinese manufacturer who could create that aircraft, either for use by the military or for use by civilians. And if it gives the Chinese a leg up, then that's all considered sort of fair play by the Chinese. And again, it's just the way their culture operates, and it's been this way for many years. We accuse the Chinese all the time in public and in private. President Obama did it many times, called out the Chinese for their intellectual property theft from American companies. President Trump has done the same thing. The Chinese try to do this plausible deniability thing, say it wasn't us, it was miscreants within our country. But I mean, it's pretty well known that it's Chinese government personnel. And so back in 2016, there were charges levied by the FBI against 7 officers in the Chinese People's Liberation Army. So these were high-level officers in the PLA, and basically they were charged with hacking, intellectual property theft, various computer crimes, and of course, when it happened, it was sort of big news, because here's the U.S. indicting not only foreign nationals, but highly placed foreign nationals who were highly placed in the government. And of course, there was really no expectation that these people would be charged in China or extradited to the U.S. So some people thought of those indictments as sort of being a waste of time and energy, but what it did help to do was it helped to sort of shine a spotlight on the things that the Chinese were doing and continue to do. And the other thing it does is it makes it difficult for those people to travel abroad. And if you're a high-level Chinese government official, being able to travel abroad, that's one of the perks that those high-level officials get out of being high-level officials in the Chinese government. It's something that most Chinese aren't able to do, and so they're able to travel abroad and spend money on products and services that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get in China. And so preventing those people from traveling abroad is, that's considered to be fairly significant. And so it's interesting then when you think about this arrest of the Huawei CFO in the context of this whole thing, where you have high-level officials who are being accused of crimes, and now you have now you actually see the potential impact. This person didn't even travel to the U.S. She traveled to Canada, but since Canada has treaties with the U.S., apparently the U.S. was able to get the Canadian government to arrest her, and now the courts are battling whether she will be released or whether she'll be extradited to the U.S. or what's going to happen. Whatever happens, even if she gets released and sent back to China, this is a pretty interesting signal being sent to the Chinese government. So these Chinese hackers are going to get charged pretty soon. I'm sure we'll see it in the news in the next couple of days. And there are certainly hackers that are linked to the Chinese government, and they're suspected of hacking U.S. companies and stealing intellectual property, right? Same old, nothing new here. Okay, next story. is related to the Australian government, and the Australian government passes, here's the headline, passes contentious encryption law, and this is a New York Times article, although there are several articles on this in different periodicals. So the law, and I'm reading the quote here, the law opposed by privacy advocates requires tech companies to provide law enforcement and security agencies with access to encrypted communications. So basically what the Australian government said was that the requirement for law enforcement to have the ability to read encrypted communications outweighs personal privacy amongst Australian citizens. And so this is related to a couple of weeks ago we talked about, maybe it was a few weeks ago, we talked about some ethics case studies related to cybersecurity stuff, and one of them was the Apple versus FBI case study. And this was a case back in 2015 probably, where there was a domestic terrorist in California who shot some people in his place of work, and his Apple telephone was encrypted. It had a passcode, and the FBI asked Apple to provide a way for the FBI to read, to get access to the data on the phone, and Apple refused. That's what this law is all about, right? The law says that tech companies have to be able to provide law enforcement with the ability to read encrypted data if they have a proper subpoena or whatever, some proper way of requesting that data. And a similar law was proposed in the U.S. in 2016, and it was voted down by by the branches of the U.S. government, and absolutely should have been voted down, right? So it was this law that said you had to provide any encryption technology had to have a backdoor so that law enforcement could get access. And the law itself is well intended, so basically they're saying that there's law enforcement needs to have a way to get access to data in certain cases, and again, well intended. That's you could certainly see the argument there, but the problem is in the second and third order effects, some of which are not easy to predict, and so the issue here is that if a tech company in the U.S., for example, is required to provide a backdoor to law enforcement, then people are going to stop buying products from that tech company in the U.S. So, if Apple, for example, is required to put a backdoor into encryption on all their handheld devices, then it's clear that eventually, at some point, somebody is going to get unauthorized access to whatever that master key is to get access to that data. It's intended to be used by law enforcement, but we see people get hacked all the time, and at some point it's pretty clear that that backdoor is going to get discovered by somebody who's not supposed to have access to it, and now all bets are off from a privacy standpoint and a security standpoint, right? We've during that ethics discussion, we talked about the U.S. digital economy relying on encryption technologies, and if we provide backdoors into those encryption technologies, then and somebody gets unauthorized access to those backdoors, then that whole digital economy sort of comes crashing down, because now when you send encrypted data to your bank to change to withdraw money, for example, and somebody else can read it and replay it, or send a bogus encrypted message that says the same thing to your bank, then there's all kinds of problems that you're going to have. So there's lots of angst over this particular law in Australia. It's not clear whether U.S. tech companies have to be able to provide this service. I think what the tech companies think right now is that they are going to have to. So if you have Facebook, for example, in order to operate in Australia, they're going to have to provide a backdoor into encrypted communications on Facebook or or on Apple phones or whatever. So what's going to happen in Australia? Our company's going to stop providing service to Australians because they don't want to have to abide by this law. That's certainly a potential something that could potentially happen. So I don't know, interesting story, and it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds over the coming months as people try to comply with it, or as they decide that they don't want to comply with it, and maybe stop doing business in Australia. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could come out of this, and so we will likely revisit this at some point in the future. Okay, so I want to do some hands-on with the Cyber Basics Module 0. So Module 0 is a relatively new module in the Cyber Basics curriculum, and it's this Intro to Linux. So there's three hands-on exercises in Module 0. First one is Intro to Linux and Understanding Directories. Second one is Linux Applications and Other Tools. Third one is Introduction to the Linux User Accounts, Groups, and Permissions. We'll start through these. Don't know how far we'll get, but you'll get a sense of what they're all about and how they can be used in class. And then at the end, before we wrap up, I want to talk about the Brigante environment. So Brigante is what's called a war game. It's an environment that we provide in the Virginia Cyber Range, and it is something that can be used by students to help them get familiar with command line, use of the command line in Linux. And it's one of these, you solve one level and then you use that solution to get to the next level. Each level requires you to find a password, and then you use that password to get to the next level. And so we'll take a look at that before we close up this session. And Brigante is a good thing for if you have time at the end of class, or if you have students who are working past other students and have some time on their hands, then Brigante is something you can point them to get them to have some hands-on time, and they can sort of do this self-directed familiarization with Linux. So we'll do some of this today, and you can participate with me or not. If you're recording this, you might want to pause here and capture this this invitation code, or if you're on here live, you can take a quick screenshot. We're going to use a Kali Linux VM in the CyberRange account, and you can use, and so you can do this hands-on yourself if you already have a Virginia CyberRange exercise area account, and if you have a Cyber Basics. If you have a Cyber Basics exercise environment provision for your class, or if you have a standalone Kali Linux environment provision for your class, you can hop in and do this along with me. Or you can use an invitation code and join a course. So I have a course that is tied to these weekly workshops, and there's a couple of hands-on environments in there. The one we're going to spend most of the time on today is the standalone Kali Linux virtual machine. So if you put in this invitation code, then you can join the course, and I'll show you how to use the invitation code here in a minute. And then for the exercises, I'm going to download these from the courseware repository, and again, it's Cyber Basics Module 0, and these are the 3 lessons, and so I'll discuss as I go ahead and do it. So to use this invitation code, folks have written that down, hopefully. NB443LQCTG7Z. What I would do is excuse me for a second. Cough there, didn't want to do it in the mic. The way I would use that invitation code is I would go to console.virginiacyberrange.net, and on the login screen there's a link down at the bottom left that says have invitation code. It's a question, I guess. Have invitation code. If you click that, you can type in this invitation code. So in this case, it's NB443LQCTG7Z. And as soon as you finish typing in the code, it recognizes the code. So it says you're registering for Virginia Cyber Range weekly workshops, and then from there, what you do is you would sign in with your Google account, and now you'll have a slot in that class, and it'll spin up the exercise environment that you need. I'm not going to do that right now because I've already got access to that exercise environment. Okay, so let me go to the Virginia Cyber Range website. And again, we're going to start out with the Cyber Basics Module 0 exercises, at least one or two of them. So I'm going to go to courseware, and I'm going to search for Cyber Basics. Whoops. Cyber Basics. And Cyber Basics has 7 modules. Module 0 is this Introduction to Linux. And so I'm going to click on Module 0. These exercises were created by William Epperly. So goes by Liam. Liam is a part-time employee of the Virginia Cyber Range. He's a recent Radford University graduate, and he is now working in down in North Carolina. But he's working in North Carolina as a penetration tester. So he's doing like a real, no kidding, cybersecurity job. He was involved in the cybersecurity club at Radford University, among other things. Computer science graduate. Anyway, smart young man, does some good work for us. I wish he'd do more work for us, but he's part-time, working full-time otherwise. But he does give us some time when he can. He's created these hands-on exercises, and he's got more of them on the way. So Module 0, this module contains a collection of introductory hands-on Linux labs for students to become familiar with the Linux OS as well as many of the tools used in cybersecurity. So I'm going to drill in on one lesson. This particular laboratory exercise, Cyber Basics Introduction to the Linux Terminal and Understanding Directories. And so this includes a hands-on exercise, as I mentioned, and in order to use this hands-on exercise, you need access to a VirtualBox, or either a VirtualBox Kali Linux virtual machine, or if you use the Virginia Cyber Range, you can use Kali Linux VM in the Virginia Cyber Range. You can use either the Cyber Basics environment, or you can use the standalone Kali Linux VM. Okay, so I'm going to grab the handout here. So this is the handout. They're all of our exercises are provided as Word documents, so they're editable, and you can add stuff, take stuff out, whatever you want to do. Put in your course name, term, exercise number, etc. So here at the top, we have the description of the exercise, provided fundamental understanding of the Linux terminal, also referred to as the command line. Resources required, Virginia Cyber Range course with Kali Linux virtual machine or Cyber Basics environment. So I'm going to log in to my Virginia Cyber Range account, sign in with Google, and I'm going to use a student login. So hopefully you can see my browser and the hands-on exercise side by side here. I'll zoom in a little bit over here so you can see it better. And I'm going to go into this course, Virginia Cyber Range weekly workshops, and here I have my Kali Linux virtual machine exercise environment. And processing. Okay, shutting down. Okay, so I'm starting my virtual machine, and take a few minutes to get fired up. In the meantime, I'm going to log in using the username student and the password student. And task 1 is related to directories. So as soon as my VM starts up, I'm going to dive in here. So basically all right, let me log in. Student. All right, I've logged in. I'm going to pull up a terminal, and I'm going to make that bigger so people can see it. So if I hit Shift Control Plus, I can make this, I can make the terminal bigger, and if I hit Control Minus, I make the terminal smaller. So over in the document, Liam talks about directories. And so I'm going to start here with typing in the command pwd, and pwd stands for print working directory. And you see that what I get is /home/student. And so Liam's document here describes what this means. Basically, the root of the file system is at the /, and then and then in the root you have various subdirectories. And then it's a tree, right? So inside each one of those subdirectories, there are other directories, and this is, this thing could branch out. You could have multiple levels of subdirectories, and then, the point of a directory is to hold files in other directories. So eventually, you get to the point where you have files that you want to interact with. But in the root of the Linux file system, these are the basic the basic subdirectories that you'll find: bin, boot, dev, etc, home, lib, media, mount, opt, root, sbin, serve, temp, user, and var. And if you're a Linux or a Unix system administrator, it's important to understand what goes into all those different folders. They each have a sort of a specific purpose. For a student, they really don't need to know what goes into all of those, but as you use the Linux file system more and more, you get sort of comfortable with what most of those subdirectories are used for. And so here I am in my home student directory, and here he asks a couple of questions. Question: based on the picture above, if pwd informs you that the current working directory is /var/, then what is the relative path of /log? What is the absolute path? Okay, so relative path means the path from wherever you are right now, and the absolute path is the path from the root of the file system. So if I'm in the var directory, so let me switch over to the var directory. And now if I say pwd, I'm in /var. So his question here is, if your current working directory is var, then what is the relative path of /log directory? So if I am in this var directory, how would I get to the log directory? Where's log? I don't see it, but there's a /log in here. Oh, if the log so if I'm in var, what's the relative path to get to log, which is a subdirectory of var? And so I'm in var right now. If I want to list the contents of that directory, I type ls, and inside the var directory is a bunch of other directories, and one of them is log. So the relative path for the log directory from right here is ./log. Now if I do pwd, I'm at var log. You see from the prompt, it tells me what directory I'm into. It's kind of helpful. So if I look at so in my prompt here, I have my username student. I have @ and then the host name. In this case, the host name is Callie. Then I have a colon. Then I have the path to my current directory, and here it's /var/log. And then I have a $sign or a sharp whatever number sign, hashtag, whatever you call it, one of these things. If I have that instead of the $, that means I'm a root user. If I have the $sign, it means I'm not a root user. In this case, I'm the user student, so my permissions are such that I don't have root access to the file system. So when I started out up here, I'm going to refer to my first line in my terminal window here. I have student at Cali, and then I don't have the directory, right? I have this tilde, the little squiggly line. We call that a tilde. But if I say pwd, the current directory is home/student. So you know, the question I would ask if I was a student is, well, how come this prompt doesn't show me /home/student? The reason it doesn't show you that is because the tilde is, I'm going to open the chat window here for a second. The tilde is shorthand for the user's home directory, and my username is student, and home directories are all in the /home folder, and so my home directory is /home/student, and so the tilde is just used as shorthand for that. The chat window here, Diane is asking, expires on 24th, 2019, so I guess I may have yeah, so this is incorrect. I made a mistake here. My slide says that the invitation code will expire on September 24th. That's not correct. I reused the slide from back in September. So these invitation codes last for a week. So this invitation code is going to expire on December 18th, 2018. Invitation code expires on December 18th, 2018. Sorry about that. So if you go ahead and use it now, then you'll be safe. Unless you're listening to a recording. If you're listening to the recording and it's already after December 18th, then send an email to support@virginiacyberrange.org and we'll get you added to this course. But our invitation codes are automatically set to expire after 1 week. Okay, so based on the picture above, a PWD informs that your current working directory is var. What is the relative path of log? Relative path is the relative path means what's the path from where I am now. So if I was back in var and I just said cd log, that would get me there. And then the next question is, what is the absolute path? So the absolute path is the path from the root of the file system. So the absolute path to that log directory is /var/log. So now I'm in the same place, right? PWD. The reason why you might want to use an absolute path as opposed to a relative path is if I am like way somewhere else in the file system and I want to go directly to the /var/log directory, I don't want to have to change directory 4 times. You know, so for example, if I was in my home directory, so here I am in my home directory and I want to get to var log. The way I change, you know, so I'm in home student. In order to get into the home directory, if I say cd ... that's going to take me up 1 level in the directory hierarchy. So if I am in, so here I'm in home, and then I'm in underneath home, there's the student directory. And when I say cd space ... that's going to take me up 1 level. Now if I say cd ... again, it's going to take me up another level. So now I'm at the root of the file system. Then I could say cd /var. Then I could say cd log. And now I'm in the var log directory. But it's kind of a lot of CDing. So I might want to just say from student, I might just want to say cd var log. And that'll get me all the way there, right? The other thing I could do is I could say cd ... home student, you know, so here this is another relative path, right? I'm saying from var log, I'm going to go ... to var ... to root, and then I'm going to go home and then student. And so this is a relative path from my current directory to the student directory. Gets me to the same place, right? Home student. So that's some basic directory manipulation. So here I am in the student directory. I'm going to type ls, and there's some stuff in there, right? ls is short for list. And most commands in the Linux terminal have specifications that can be appended to the command called flags. Let's have a look at two very useful flags in the ls command. So, these are called flags, or they're sometimes called options, command line options. So if I say ls-a, see, I get a different list, right? So when I just said ls, I got this list. When I do ls with a -a, I get a much longer list. And so if you look at these different things that are displayed, first of all, you'll see that all the stuff that is listed using the ls command, all that stuff is in this longer list. So the -a means to list all. So you see that desktop is in there, and documents, and downloads, and music, and pictures, and public. So all the stuff that's up here is also repeated down here. What's the difference, though? The things that are listed with the -a flag that are not listed without it all share the same trait, and I'll let you think about that just for a second, and then I'll tell you what the answer is. Again, so you look at desktop, documents, downloads, music, pictures, public templates, thin client drives, videos. Those things are all up here already. The difference is that there's also a bunch of files that start with a dot. And in Linux, things that start with a dot are called hidden files. And they're not super well hidden, right? Because it's easy for me to see them by using the -a command, but they're things that, I mean, most of them are not files that the user created. They're files that are created by the operating system for some purpose. And, they're things that the user normally would not interact with. And so instead of cluttering up the directory with a bunch of files that the user probably didn't create and probably won't interact with, the operating system prepends those file names with a dot, and the dot just says, don't list this when you're doing a standard directory listing. But the -a flag in the ls command gives you the ability to see all that stuff. Then the other useful flag is the -l. So if I say ls-l, I get more information about each of the things in the directory. So let me, so if I do an ls, and then if I do an ls-l, it's the same list of things. There's just a bunch more information about each one of the things. The additional information includes the permissions, and we'll talk about permissions later on. These are permissions for each one of the things in the list. Actually, at the very beginning of the permissions, there's a D on all of these, and a D specifies that these are all directories. So none of these are files, they're all directories. The next two pieces of information are the owner of the file and the group that the file belongs to. Owners and groups, and we'll talk more about owners and groups. And then the next bit of information is the size of the file. These are directories. They're all of size 4096, except for this one that belongs to root. And then the next piece of information is the date that this thing was created. And then the name, right? So ls-l is the long listing. And I can use both the A and the L at the same time if I do something like ls-al or ls-la. And here's what I get. I get all the files listed, and I get the information on each file, even the ones that start with a dot. Okay, so if you want to find out more information about the ls command, like what other useful command line switches you can use, you use the manual pages. So if I say man ls, that means give me the manual for the ls command. And if I do that, it tells me that ls lists directory contents, it tells you how to use it, and description lists information about the files in the current directory. By default, sorts entries alphabetically unless you use a different way to sort. Mandatory arguments too long for options, short options too, yada, yada, yada. So here's the -A. It means list all of the files. Do not ignore entries starting with a dot. -A, do not list the implied dot and dot dot. There's all kinds of different flags you can use with this that you would use for different reasons. But if you wanted to become an expert in the ls command, then you should read this manual page. Okay, when I'm done reading the manual page, if I just hit the Q button, that's going to take me back to where I was. Okay, how to create and change directories. So so I'm in my home directory now. So if I say pwd, I can now use the make dir command and create a directory called cyber. Now if I do an ls, I see an additional thing in here. I see this new directory I created called cyber. So I can cd into cyber. Now I have this empty directory, and then I could do a print working directory, and I'm in home student cyber. Here's a little Linux trick, tab completion. So what tab completion means is that if I start typing something, a folder name, for example, I can hit tab, and tab will try to complete the line for me based on the context of the command that I'm using. So if I say cd ... Oops. Now if I say cd and then I want to go to the cyber directory, I just type cy and then I hit the tab button. That's going to automatically complete that line. And the way tab completion works is that the Linux command line is going to try to complete the line, but it might not always be able to do so. Like, for example, if I had some other thing that started with a CY, then it wouldn't be able to tell CY cyber from CY cybersecurity, for example, and it wouldn't quite know what to do when I hit tab completion. So, for example, if I was to say CD and then hit a capital D and then hit tab, it's not going to do anything. Why not? Because there are multiple directories that start with a capital D, and the command line doesn't know how to deconflict those things. If I hit tab again, it's going to give me a list of potential things that I'm trying to get to. So in this case, could be desktop, could be documents, could be downloads. Now if I add an O there and then I hit tab again, it still doesn't know what to do, because there are two different directories that I could be trying to go to, documents or downloads, and not until I provide the third letter does it realize that I'm trying to get to documents. So not until I can unambiguously distinguish between different options will the tab completion work properly. Okay. Students home directory user, if you cd with no, oh yeah, so here's another little trick here. So if I was in var log, so I'm in the var log directory. If I run cd with no specification, the directory will change by default to the user's home directory. So if I just say cd enter, you'll see that I'm now in my home directory. So it's a little trick. If you're trying to get back to your home directory, you don't have to specify it in your command line. You just say cd. So if current directory was home student, personal email, best 2018, all the stuff, and you wish to go to best of 2018, how would you get to it? Well, okay, so you could do, yeah, so this is just a little exercise. It's asking you how do you get to a specific directory. And here we're using an absolute path. I already went through some of this stuff, traversing up and down the directory hierarchy. Okay, I can also, so I'm in my home directory, right? And I created this directory called cyber. I can now remove that directory. If I say rm dir cyber, you'll see that that directory is now gone. So now at the end of this are a list of questions. If you're working in a Linux system and run the following commands, after running the commands, you notice that you now see your new directory in the output Y. Obviously, this thing is started with a dot, so it's a hidden file. If you were to ls with a -A, then you would see it. Anyway, a list of questions after that, and the answers are all provided at the end of this document. Okay, so that's the very basic intro to Linux, the Linux terminal, and understanding directories. So we used commands like print working directory and ls and make dir and rmdir to create and remove directories. And then we got some notion of the directory hierarchy in this exercise. All right, so I'm going to close that guy, go back to, whoops, go back to the next exercise is Linux applications and other tools. And I'm going to talk about this just briefly because I want to pull up the Brigante exercise environment before we finish here. Download. Okay, so in this exercise, we'll explore some various tools in the Linux operating system. Though Kali Linux comes preloaded with many tools for security practice, it is like all other operating systems with web browser, applications, and text editors, and those tools are sometimes useful. Okay, so I just downloaded the exercise handout, and here it is. I'll zoom in a little bit. I'm going to start with the same exercise environment. So here I am in my Kali Linux virtual machine. Username student, password student, running Firefox. So there's a couple of ways to start Firefox in the Kali Linux VM. I could probably find it under the applications menu. So up in the upper left-hand corner of Kali Linux, there's the applications menu. It's kind of like the Windows, the start menu in a Windows. So you have the little icon down here in Windows, and you click the Windows-looking thing, and you get the start menu. Same idea. If I go to applications, then go down here to Internet, I can find Firefox here. So Firefox is the browser that's integrated with Kali Linux, and now my browser is open. I could go to virginiacyberrange.org, and I can go to the Virginia Cyber Range webpage from there. I can also get to Firefox down here. So at the bottom of my Kali Linux window, there's a little menu that has some useful options. So I could click on the little compass icon that opens Firefox. There's a search thing here. I could probably start typing in Firefox here and open it that way. Or I could type Firefox at the command line and open it that way. So lots of ways to get to Firefox and other applications. Another useful tool is a piece of software called LeafPad. LeafPad is a text editor, so it's like Notepad on a Windows box. So to get to LeafPad, I'm sure it's in the application menu, or I could go to my Finder and start typing in LeafPad and open my text editor. If I want to, sometimes it's useful to open LeafPad with a particular file. So if I open LeafPad, and then I start typing something, is my data, and then I can save it, for example, and I might want to save it in my student directory, and I'll call it my text file.txt. Save. Then I can close LeafPad. So I just saved that file in my home directory on my Kali Linux machine. So how do I find it? Well, I can type ls, and I see the my text file.txt. So how do I open this thing again in LeafPad? Well, I could open the LeafPad application and then click open and browse to it. Probably an easier way is to just say LeafPad, my text file. I hit tab to get it completed, put an ampersand at the end. What the ampersand does, I'll show you what the ampersand does. I'm not going to put the ampersand at the beginning, at the end here. I just typed in LeafPad and then the name of the file. Here's my file, and I can start editing it, do whatever I want to do. But if I go back to my terminal window, I don't have access to the terminal anymore. And the reason I don't have access to the terminal is I've redirected the terminal process to the LeafPad application. It's running in the foreground. So I've made it so I can't use the terminal, at least this terminal, at the same time as LeafPad. So I'm going to close LeafPad. I'm not going to save the changes. When I do that, you see I get access to my terminal again, but I may want to have access to LeafPad in the terminal at the same time. And the way to do that is I could run my LeafPad application, but I put an ampersand at the end, and that means run it in the background. And running things in the background, it's kind of misleading. I still get the window that comes up. I can still use LeafPad however I want to, but I still have access to my terminal. And I can still see that LeafPad is running. Here's LeafPad running. Okay, other tools that are described in this exercise are image viewer. So there's a piece of software called Ristretto, which is for image manipulation, and then this has this set of instructions has you pull down an image file from a website, and then you can open up the image file, and then there's some questions at the end. Okay, so those are the first two. Again, very introductory, but these are probably helpful for your students who haven't had any interaction with the Kali Linux command line or tools before. Okay, I'm going to close this exercise, and I want to open up Brigante, and I'm going to hit this power button here. So so in this course that I've created, the Virginia Cyber Range Weekly Workshop course, I've added a Brigante exercise environment. This is something I would encourage you to use next semester if you have students who don't, who you want to get some more Linux command line time with. If you want them to spend more time with the command line, this is something you can do in class, sort of a self-directed exercise. So here's the description. Brigante is a self-paced, hands-on exercise with multiple levels designed to familiarize beginners with the Linux user interface and terminal commands. It is based on overthewire.org's Bandit Wargame. It is presented as a series of increasingly difficult levels. Solving one level gives the user access to the next. Students will have to apply problem-solving skills as they make their way through the series of challenges. The game assumes the student can open a Linux terminal window to get to the command line interface, but assumes little experience with Linux beyond that. Students should log into the Brigante environment with the username student and password student. They should then open a web browser and browse to http://brigante.example.com. Okay, so I'm going to go full screen. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go full screen here. Then I will. Okay, so now I'm in my Cyber Range account. I just logged in. This is the Brigante exercise environment, and I'm going to open a terminal window, and I'm going to open my web browser. Okay, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say brigante.example.com. So this is what students have to do. If they read that little blurb of text I just read to you, that basically tells them everything they need to know to get started. You log into your Linux virtual machine, and you open up the web browser, and you browse to brigante.example.com, and Brigante is, in this case, goes up to level 14. We're going to release a new version of this after the Christmas break that's going to go up to level 25. But for now, we have up to level 14. Brigante Wargame aimed at beginners. It'll teach the basics needed to know to be able to play other war games. Organized in levels. You start with level 0, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So begin with level 0. linked at the left of this page, good luck. So I click on level 0 and it says, goal of this level is for you to log into the game using SSH. The host to which you need to connect is called brigante.example.com on port 22. The username is Brigante0. The password is Brigante0. Once logged in, go to level 1 page to find out how to beat level 1. Okay, so commands you may need to solve this level. Okay, so it tells you here's a command that you should be familiar with in order to defeat this level. And so, so again, this page tells the student everything they need to know to solve level 0, which will give them the password to Brigante level 1. And so the student may have to do a little research on SSH, but they're told the server that they're supposed to log into, the port to use, the username and the password, and that's enough to solve this. So I already know how to do it, so I'm just going to do it. SSH and Brigante0 at brigante.example.com. And I spelled something wrong. Brigante.example.com. Okay, now, are you sure you want to continue connecting? Yes. Now it's going to ask me for the password, and the password is Brigante0. Okay, so now I'm logged in, Brigante0 at, and then here's the host name. So now I'm logged into this Brigante thing, right? And it says, once logged in, go to the level 1 page to find out how to beat level 1. Okay, so I go to the level 1 page and it says, the password for the next level is stored in a file called readme located in the home directory. Use this password to log into Brigante 1 using SSH. Whenever you find a password for a level, use SSH on port 22 to log in, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so commands you may need to solve this level. Well, it says that I should find a file called readme in the home directory. So if I say ls, oh, there's a file called readme. Okay. Now I want to be able to read the contents of that file, and we're going to use a command line command. So these are all the commands that are useful to solving this challenge, and actually you only need 2 of them. Really, you only need 1 of them. ls is helpful to find that file called readme, but the cat command, if I say cat readme, that's going to give me the contents of that file, and so that is my password. So, so that's the password to get into the next level of Brigante. And when students are doing this war game, I usually tell them that they should record all these passwords as they find them. So I'm going to open up LeafPad. And I'm going to paste that password in here. Because if I do this later, whoops. Copy, edit, paste. If I do this later and I don't want to have to redo all this to find all these passwords. So if I keep a record of the passwords that I find as I go along, then when I come back into this, I can start where I left off. So this was the level 1 password, right? So now I'm going to say exit, and now I'm going to log into Brigante 1, and the password is that. I'm going to copy, paste. You notice if you paste a password on the Linux terminal, you don't see the password. But now I'm logged in as Brigante 1, right? I'm not Brigante. Up here I was logged in as Brigante 0. Here I'm logged in as Brigante 1. Okay, now it says go to level 2 to get instructions for the next level. Level 2, the password for the next level is stored in a file called dash located in the home directory. So if I say ls, there's the file called dash, and then I'm going to want to cat that file. And you'll see that if I say cat dash, it's not going to work. Anyway, now I would do some problem solving to figure out how to get that file printed out. The Brigante webpage tells me here's some commands that might be helpful. Here's some helpful reading material, Google search dash file name, advanced bash scripting. So these are different websites that might help you solve this. So you see how this works, right? You solve each challenge and you get the password to the next challenge. And then as you go through it, you it's a good idea to copy these things. So now I'm going to say cat dash, whoops. I know how to do this. Cat dash, whoops. Let me Google search on dash file name. Obviously, I haven't done this in a while. Oh yeah, of course. Cat. It's in the current folder, // dash, and there. Okay, there's the thing. All right. Then I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it down here. And then I can say exit. Then I can log into the next level. Okay, so you get the idea. Problem solving, they start out fairly easy, ramps up pretty quickly. So students will take a long time to get to level 14. And again, after Christmas, we'll have Brigante going up to, I think, level 25. So not a bad hands-on exercise for particularly for your students who sort of get ahead of the game and they need something to do in class that's productive. Then you can point them to this, and they'll learn a lot about the Linux command line. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And so thanks for joining us this week, and we look forward to more weekly workshops after the Christmas break. So thanks. Got some chat questions here. Okay, there we go. Awesome, good. Well, thank you. Thanks. Stop my recording.